growing up in church, every time I would, sin, I knew I was doing wrong. I would, I was always convicted, and I always knew, if I died at that time, I knew I was going to go to hell. I always knew it. I would just always fight it, always.
Yeah.
But one thing I do remember is, I think it was a revival we were having. And I think a pastor, he was talking about how he was talking about church kids and how a lot, like some of them, that for so long that they don't want to be saved, and they're always, and eventually they just nothing resonates with them because they've been fighting God for so long. So eventually, God will be like, God will just say, okay, you want to keep fighting me, you want to keep fighting it, then you. So I would always think about that and think about, like, if I never feel that conviction, God, like I was always scared of that. I was scared, never to not, it just like not to be convicted during service, or not to be knowing that I'm, doing wrong.
Welcome to One Way Podcast. I'm your host, Angel Ariola, and today we have Angel Rodriguez with us, and he's going to share a little bit of his testimony, and he's going to, just tell us, you know, growing up in church, and how long has he been saved, and what all God's doing in his life. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So are you ready, bro?
Hello, my name is Angel. I'm 22 years old. I've been saved going on 3 years. And I grew up in church. My parents came into the church when I was 1, so all I knew growing up was church. So that was basically my whole life. And just, I've only been saved for 3 years though, because at the beginning, I well, my parents were my mom and dad were pastoring on the west side for uh, I believe like 6 years, and I was saved. That was around the time I was in like middle to beginning of high school, and I was saved for a little while, but when I got to high school, there was a lot of peer pressure, and I didn't go like against it, and I just gave into it, and I just didn't hold ground on staying saved and making my mind up that I'm going to serve God. So I went astray, and then I didn't get saved until after I graduated, until I turned about I believe I was 19. So yeah, that's basically the background. I grew up in church ever since can remember.
Right. So you got saved. How old are you now?
22.
22. You've been saved 3 years?
Mhm.
And you grew up in church. So growing up, I mean, well, you grew up in church, but what all do you remember from like childhood, like from since you can remember, like 5 or 6? 'Cause I'm pretty sure that's when people start remembering stuff. Like all you knew was church, right? And how was that? And like how growing up, what was life like for a
Well,
church kid?
growing up, life was, I went to elementary school, and I went to middle school, and it was a lot different in school than it was, at home and at church, because at school I would see, people. I would see maybe like some of my friends. It would be a lot different than at church or at home. My parents, we didn't cuss. We didn't. I never saw my parents. I never saw my dad cuss at my mom, or they wouldn't. He would never hit her, or never. I never saw any like violence or any sin, basically. So that's so I at a young age I began, seeing right from wrong. I would, anytime, I did anything wrong, my dad he disciplined us, and we so started so like at a young age we began learning right from wrong, instead of just, you know not.
How was it at school? Like as far as like so you're at home, You go to church, and there's no really there's a big difference from going to church, being around church kids, and then you go to a regular school. I'm sure there's a bunch of peer pressure, even at a young age. Like, what was that like? Like, how was there certain things that you were like, man, well, we don't do this at home, so I get to do it here? Was there any stuff like that were like kind of hard for you, as far as like, well, you don't do a lot of stuff at home, but when you go to school, like, explain that.
Well, as a kid, like I would say like in elementary, I didn't really like I didn't
You weren't like a
really.
bad kid.
Yeah, I wasn't like a bad kid. I wouldn't try to. I mean, I guess I would try to fit in at school, but I wouldn't, cuss. I wouldn't, I just that didn't bother me. It didn't start happening until I was like around middle school. I did get. That's around the time my parents got sent out, so they started pastoring, and then I was helping a lot in the church. I was playing the guitar for song service, and then I was so I was saved. But at school, I didn't. Probably nobody knew that my parents were pastoring, that I was a Christian. I would try and stay quiet, and if and fit in as much as I can without like sinning, I guess.
Right.
So I wouldn't preach. I wouldn't do any of that at
So
all.
you're how old are you at the time? Like 14, 13, 14?
The first, yeah, around like the first time I got saved, I was about yeah, probably like 13, 14, and then that's whenever we started and then that's yeah, around like 13, 14, and then through I remember my freshman and sophomore year, I was saved, but I was really quiet in school. Those were my first 2 years of high school, so I was really quiet, and then that's whenever I started, I was getting a little older. I was 14, 15, so I began, I do remember, yeah, I do remember that I began trying to fit in more, and not not be different from the
Right,
people
right.
at school.
How do
Then
you, how do you how, like? I can imagine, like, I'm pretty sure it's hard to being raised up in church and knowing right from wrong, right? So you come home, you don't see a bunch of stuff, and then you go to school and you're seeing everybody, like, kids. I'm sure in high school, because I know when I was in high school, kids were already like smoking and cussing and having boyfriend and girlfriends. So I'm pretty sure all those things were like you were wrestling with, as far as like being tempted, I guess, to do so, right? How was that for you? Like, was it very hard for you? Like, man, like, I want to do this, but at home, and how was all that?
mm, well, I mean, I did see a lot of that. I went to a high school on the west side, so basically everybody there was ghetto and
Right, right.
like that. Um, so yeah, I would see people smoking. I would see people just all kinds of things, but nothing really like I guess drew me away. But I would it was just mainly like fitting in. The people that I did like hang around with and that were I would that were, I guess, my friends there, they probably the only thing that really got me to I guess backslide was just trying to fit in. I just wanted to be like like everybody else, because like I said, all I knew growing up was church, and I've never seen it much different. So as I was growing up, I was getting kind of introduced to that in high school, and seeing more, and like learning more about the world. So I was like, I did want to try things. And
So it was not even
mhm.
really like what it sounds like. It was not even like the sin. It was not even just like smoking, drinking. You just wanted to be like normal,
Yeah,
kind of like, in a way,
basically,
right?
yeah,
Right. You weren't
I
trying to do
did.
nothing crazy, but you just didn't want to be known as like a church kid.
hmm Yeah, I mean, of course I did want to try try smoking, just to see, because I would see so many guys that I would talk to. They were almost always high in high school, and then so yeah, that was one of the main things for me. I didn't want to be different. I wanted to try and fit in and see what and do what a lot of people that I talked to in high school were doing. You know.
Right. Wow. So okay, now so you're in middle school. No, you're in high school already. You're dealing with all that. Okay, and then you say you got saved at. Oh, you know what? Tell us about how was it when your parents were pastoring? How was that?
It was a lot
Like for
different.
you, like did you ever feel like you have to be a certain way?
Oh
Or
yeah. I did. I did have to. We would go to maybe some conferences, or I would meet people, and they would. I mean, if they knew that my parents were pastors, so there's always the oh, he's a pastor's kid, or they're. So it was a different, and I do hear that a lot of people like, oh, it's hard being a pastor's kid. It's hard. They seen it now as I've grown up a little bit, learned a lot more, matured a little bit. I've seen a lot of people like it's hard growing up as a church kid, but seeing it now, it's really saved me
right,
from
right,
a lot of things in the world that my hearing my dad's testimony, or people in the church learning like what they've gone through, and seeing it now that I've been protected from that because
right,
my parents
right,
were saved when I was really young. So
right.
that's all I knew. You know.
Yeah, it's probably like I don't even think. I mean, I think they say it's hard, but really, it's just the hard part is like for them, they think it's hard because they can't do whatever they want. They can't do. I think that's why they say that oh, it's hard, and you don't under like no, it's just that you can't do whatever you want. So you, and especially when you're a teenager. I mean, I would assume because well, I have a teenage daughter, so I'm sure they think that they're living the worst life ever because they can't do nothing. So like, would you agree with that? Like, that's
Oh
probably what it
yeah.
was.
Oh yeah. I do remember feeling like that for a little while. Like I was like, oh, this is it sucks. I'm pastor's kid, and especially I was a teenager in high school, and I for a while I do remember I did I was trying to be saved, and I remember revivals we would have, and I would be like, yes, I'm gonna make up my mind and make but what really like for me, what really like I said, what like the reason I backed it was because I didn't want to be different. I didn't want to tell people like, no, I don't do that, or like I don't want to I didn't want to have to preach to my like people my because I would go on outreaches all the time, and I would just tell people, hey, like I just from church, I just want to give you this and walk away. Try to say the
Yeah,
least I
yeah,
can, you know, but and I would never really actually preach,
right.
but now I meet people that are they're just they're and I have to sometimes I have to like, no, I don't I'm a Christian. I don't do things like that, and it's really it's really a lot of church kids and pastors kids. They just have to make up their mind that that you're not gonna give in to the like to the world, and the
Like peer pressure and stuff like
the peer
that.
pressure. You're not gonna give into that. You're gonna stand for God.
So I guess you would say like for like teenagers or anybody who's kind of like afraid to witness, or it's like really you have like you just said you have to make up your mind like you know what I'm gonna serve God no matter what people say, right? So you got saved at 19. What do you think it was for you like that you could say like you know what this is? Do you feel like you were fighting God at any point?
I
Because
think I was 20. I know that I think about it, but it's going on 3 years this year. I will next month. So
there was
3 years.
times in the church where the majority of the time you weren't saved when you were at church, right? Growing up.
Oh yeah, exactly.
So you're coming to church, you're hearing all the preaching. I'm sure that was like how was that? How did you deal with that as far as like you come to church, you hear they pull altar call, how was all that? How did that affect you? How did you deal with all that?
So I can tell you that I remember so many times that I would be in church, and I didn't actually like make up my mind that I was gonna like, all right, I'm not gonna even try to be saved, try to get like be halfway, or try not to be like anything like that. So I made up my mind. It was mainly whenever my parents came back from pastoring. We came back to the mother church. We were I remember it was my my junior year of high school, I remember so many times that we would be in church. God would be dealing with me like so hard, but I was like just I was trying my best to just um try my best to just just like not feel it, but it
Right,
was
right.
like throughout the whole service I was just convicted like crazy, So and I do remember so many times of that. Like I would just try just fighting God every Sunday, fighting God every Wednesday, and just convicted and just knowing that like because I've heard it,
Yeah, yeah.
throughout my life, so I would just be fighting God every Sunday and every Wednesday, and then but acting like no, I'm good,
Yeah. And it's crazy
So
because like you're saying, every Sunday and Wednesday you have to deal with that.
hmm
Like putting God off, and then once service finishes, all right, cool, I'm good. Like the
hmm
God's presence, you're not in God's presence, so it's kind of all right, I'm good till Wednesday. And so you're dealing with that almost your whole life.
yeah.
Wow.
hmm
And I'm sure there's pressure from even inside the church because you grew up around a bunch of the church kids.
hmm
So how was that too? Do you think their influence on you, or like were you kind of like, did you not want to be saved because other church kids were saved? Because sometimes that happens too. There's a bunch of teenage kids that they don't want to serve God because they don't want to feel like there's a bunch of church kids who are not saved and they don't want to feel like, oh, well, you're saved now and you're better,
hmm
because that's how it goes. So
yeah.
did you go through that?
Well, I didn't really go through that too much because, well, whenever I was younger, like growing up in church since I was one, there were um, a few friends that I had, growing up. We were friends. I had there was like a good friend group, me and my
Right.
brothers and some of our friends.
Hold on. Before you got sent out, your parents got sent out. How old are you?
Um, I believe I was when my parents got sent out. I think I was maybe 12, maybe
Oh,
somewhere
okay.
around
So,
there.
but
So.
you were already in church though, right? You were already at the mother church.
hmm hmm
Okay, okay,
Yeah, so I
okay,
was probably around maybe like yeah, like I think like maybe 12. 'Cause I think they were out for 6 years. Yeah, so about 12, I think.
okay. And so, but was there a bunch of church kids at the time?
Yeah, yeah. There was a lot of us actually. There was like like I was saying a friend group that we had like me and my brothers, some other there was around like I would say maybe 10 to 12 of us that we were a good amount of us. And I mean, as we were all young. Like I think the oldest of us were probably maybe like somewhere between 12 and 13, maybe. So we were all young.
None of
We
y'all were
all grew up
saved.
together. I mean, well, at that time we were because we were all like we
Yeah, yeah,
were
yeah.
barely maybe about to go into middle school or like just started. So we were all like young, so we weren't trying to do
Right,
do
right,
bad
right,
or trying to rebel.
right.
But um but during like the main or my I guess my main teenage years, we were sent out, so I didn't really have
Mm.
much. I didn't really interact with a lot of
Church kids,
my church kid friends. I guess
right? Because
that
you're
were like
pioneering,
because
right?
yeah,
So
we were
it,
pioneering, so
yeah.
we didn't see them as much. So yeah, so I would say like I wasn't really an influence from church kids.
It was more from
More from
school.
school, and I just didn't wanna didn't wanna stand for God and
Right. And
preach.
so your other brothers, because you got two older brothers, were they ever saved at that time? Like when you're in middle school and all that, when you're pioneering, were they saved at any time?
No, no, I don't think they were. They were just I mean we would all help out in the church because it's a pioneer church, so we were
Y'all deal with,
small. So
yeah.
I was playing the guitar. One of my brothers were playing the drums. Mom was on the piano, and then my oldest brother he was doing like soundboard.
Right.
So yeah, we were. I mean, we were all helping, and we were all um, we were all doing. I guess doing our part.
Right.
But for I don't think they were saved.
So did their influence affect you in any way, as far as them not being saved or being saved, or like did it make impact in your life too?
I would say I would say a little bit. Yeah, they might have had a little, but I mean, since I've I think what really helped me was I just didn't. Well, I mean, like in high school, whenever we came back, my brothers weren't saved. When my oldest brother turned 18, as soon as he graduated, turned 18, he left. He left. We didn't see him for at least a good year. We didn't, parents didn't talk to him, so we didn't see him for a while. So after that, we were like, man, like that was we didn't want that. And then the same thing happened with my other older brother. He right when he turned 18, because growing up we knew there was boundaries and certain rules we had to follow in my dad's house. So so he was like, I guess they were 18, so they wanted to do what they wanted to do. So my dad was like, you're not gonna do it here. So they both just split as soon as they turned 18, and we same thing with him. We didn't talk to him for about a year. They just they didn't want to. But then um and then just I guess seeing that, and whenever they both left, I wasn't. I had already backslidden. I was already a junior in high school. My brother was a senior, and then my oldest brother had already left. So I can say because we were all pretty close.
Right.
My oldest, we're all like 11 months apart, not even a full year. So we were all really close. So we were so I wouldn't we were all really close. So I didn't. Yeah, so I would say that did have an impact on my life.
And when they left, both of them out the house, what did that do for you? Did it like, well, did that kind of make you want to watch it do the same thing when I get out, or was it like I don't want that?
No, well, no, that's one thing I didn't. I knew I didn't want to do. So I was like, I knew if I'm gonna leave, I'm not gonna leave the way they did. Because we've seen both of them leave. I just saw the impact it had on our family. Like I mean, my dad didn't want to tell them they had to leave, but he's not gonna let them let them do what they wanted to do and influence my younger siblings. And I saw the impact they had on my mom and my younger siblings, and how it hurt them. And so and then so I was like, that's one thing I knew. Even if I wasn't saved, and if I wanted to leave, I knew I was like, I don't want to do that. I knew I was like, no, I'm not gonna. I'm always gonna keep a good. I've always wanted to keep a good relationship with my dad and my mom, because I always knew that they've helped us,
Right.
because we didn't we because I mean, of course it's because of God, but they got saved. They've kept us from a lot of things, and we've yeah, like I said, like we've been kept from a lot of things, and
Right.
we've they've helped us, saved us from many things, and I'm grateful for that.
Right. Right.
I'm really I would want to show them that I'm grateful. I'm always keep a good relationship
Right.
with that.
Yeah, I think a lot of what I know, uh, like you're saying, like they spared y'all from a lot of stuff, and a bunch of kids, a bunch of teenagers don't understand that really when we tell them that, man, you don't want to do this because this is gonna happen, and because we're trying to save them from like everything we've been through, and like I always tell everybody, I look at your parents, how they raised y'all. I wish that I would have had parents who raised me like y'all, even though I'm pretty sure I would have hated it too. But I see now all the effects that it had on like even your lives, knowing that your parents raised you up and that like really helped you out, because really a bunch of kids don't understand that mentally, like things when you get involved in sin, things that you get involved in, that stuff is hard to take out, like out of your mind and experiences. It really jacks you up, and it saves you from all that. So when they guard you from the world and all the types of crazy stuff the world's trying to throw at you, it really, like in a way, the best way I could describe it is that you're more like your mind's more clean, more pure, and when you don't grow up like that, especially like in a Christian household, it really messes you up, because I got four brothers too, and every single one of us grew up in the street, no father, and all of us end up in prison. And so now that I see y'all, it's like, man, like this is I wish I would have had that. But I see how your dad raised y'all, and it's like all of y'all like, and the majority are y'all saved, and even the ones that are not saved, they're not just bad people. They're not like criminals or anything. They're just not saved for whatever reason, right? But I see that their life, their impact, it did something to you because I mean, like I was telling you earlier, like in the car, like oh, your little brothers and sisters are all like nice and real well mannered, and it's like little stuff like that makes a difference about how you raise your children and stuff like that. But yeah, that's one thing I man I I respect stuff like that. And I look up to like men who take care of their kids and provide their examples, and like really that's the blessing from God when you raise up your children in Christ. But okay, so tell us. So you get back from pioneering. You're what, 19?
No, I was when we got back. I was around like I believe like 16.
Okay,
Like 15 or
16.
16, somewhere
Okay.
around there.
And then so what would you say that? What was a point for you? All right, this I have to get saved. Like, what was it that made you want to get saved?
My junior and senior year, I wasn't saved. I would try to do everything I could behind my parents' back because I knew I had to and I didn't want to. And there were a few times where I got caught and I got in trouble. And I mean, I knew it was gonna happen. And even things while I was, I knew I was sinning. I can tell you that growing up in church, I was every time I would, sin, I knew I was doing wrong. I would I was always convicted.
Right, right,
Always. I always knew. Um, um, I always knew I was doing wrong.
right,
You know,
right,
because
right.
I've heard so many people like, yeah, like they feel like they're doing wrong, but they've never been to church. They've from hearing their testimonies and hearing how they grew up. That's just all they've known since they were younger.
Right.
But me, I would always I always knew I was doing wrong, and I always knew if I died at that time, I knew I was going to go to hell. I always knew it. I would just always fight it,
Yeah.
always.
Wow. It's crazy. Like, like you know that, and really I think it's harder for people who grow up in church and people who've been in church than regular sinners out there because we know the judgment that comes with it. So we could be doing this and that, and we know, like, dang, like you said, if I were to die right now, I'm gonna go to hell, and that gets tiring. I'm sure it
Oh
does
yeah,
get. Yeah, it's like every day you have to fight, and it's kind of like, oh, like so you don't die, and it's like the next day, right? You get another chance, and it's like every single day you have to worry about like, man, because you know that there's gonna be judgment for your sin. But go ahead, continue.
yeah, and as I was throughout high school, and then after my brother graduated, um, he uh, he left. Right when he turned 18, he left. We didn't talk to him for a little while. So I was the oldest in the house. I was it was a lot different once my two older brothers left. It was a lot different, and I knew. But uh, I still didn't want to. I was still fighting God. I was
Right.
still just trying to push him away, even though I knew I couldn't. Never had peace because I knew I was fighting God. Never had, but it was a good not having peace. You know what I mean? Like it was good because I knew that God still wanted. He still cared. He still wanted to. But one thing I do remember is I think it was a revival we were having. And I think a pastor he was talking about how some he was talking about church kids and how a lot like some of them that for so long they don't want to be saved, and they're always, and eventually it just nothing nothing resonates with them because they've been fighting God for so long. So eventually, God will be like, God will just say, okay, you don't want to keep fighting me, you want to keep fighting it, then you. So I would always think about that and think about like if I never feel that conviction of God, like I was always scared of that. I was scared,
Yeah.
never to not it just like not to be convicted during service, or not to be um knowing that I'm doing wrong, or just knowing that like that God that God not not trying to continue fighting, fighting
Right,
for
right.
my soul eventually, So that's one thing that I was always scared of that. So I was always scared, that I would stop feeling that conviction, stop feeling like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, like
Like
God's presence.
like
Yeah.
yeah, God's presence and stuff. Nothing would it was just like it would be nothing.
Right.
So I was that's one thing that like really I would always deal with. But eventually I was but I do remember one time it was one of the guys from the church. He I mean, well, as a church kid, you know, many people they just think like, oh, he grew up in church. We're not gonna. I mean, they knew I wasn't saved, but no one would really talk to me. No one would really, like try and like, hey, like, and um
And
and really like,
more so because they're like, well, you've been in church, you already know.
mhm,
What can we tell you?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and so they would be like, nobody would really talk to me. Nobody would really like try and like, hey, like, you need to you need to get saved. Like, what's going on? But one of the guys, he that's what really helped me was one time, the first time he came over to me, he was just telling me like, like, why don't you want to get saved? It was during an altar call. I was ready. That it was just great preaching like it always is, and I was convicted at the altar call, but I was just fighting it. Didn't want to go up to the altar. Didn't want to repent. Didn't want to just say okay, I'm done. And and he told me, he was like, okay, you don't want to pray right now, but you know you know you know what you're doing to
Right.
yourself, and if you ever want to, I'm here to talk to you. You ever you want to pray, let me know, and I'll. So I was always, so what builds up to me finally getting saved and just saying I'm gonna I'm gonna just I don't need to fight it anymore.
Right.
That, and I knew that, so I just it was one altar call. I remember just going up to him and I was like, can you just keep with me?
Mm.
I'm done. So I do. So I went up. And since that day, I was, and as as a church kid, some people. So I prayed and I knew what I had to do.
Right.
I knew I was like, all right, I'm gonna stop this. I know I need to stop this. I need to tell these people, like, because I knew, like that. So I mean, of course, it wasn't easy, but just I get that. What helped too was growing up in church. I knew what I had to do. So
Right.
once I did it, I was it helped a lot.
Right. Right. Wow. So really, you were just like tired of it. It's like because it sounds like it's like you wanted to be safe, but it was kind of like you were just wrestling with it and
Hmm.
kind of just got tired of just putting that off. And to go back to what you were saying earlier, to feel like I would be afraid. I'm sure anybody to get to that point where you don't even feel God,
Hmm.
it's like it's scary. That's a scary place to be, because the Bible says that he'll give you over to the
Hmm.
things you want to do, and it's kind of like, ooh, like that's something else. But
And I remember hearing that from I don't remember what pastor it was, but I do remember hearing that, and that's always stuck with me.
right,
Always like I don't I because I knew I was fighting God every day.
right,
Every morning I would wake up. I would every night when I would go to sleep. I always knew I was fighting God, and I was always terrified about you know not feeling God's presence anymore, not being convicted anymore. So that's
right.
one thing that really got me.
It's okay. So you could say that 20 years old, and then what happened? What begins to happen? Like, what are some things you know that God like helped you with, or things that because you say you never really smoked, never really drank. But what were things that you could say, like, you know what, I know it's so God did this for me, like things that are inside that you maybe you struggle with, or what are some things you know that God started doing for you once you got saved?
When I was like in high school is whenever around the time I started, like my mind became really perverted.
Right.
So I was really I mean I was really quiet, and I would just that's whenever my mind had like I would just um like my mind had become really perverted, right? And then but I was growing up in church. I was innocent. I wasn't around people. I mean I didn't I don't know how to explain. Like I just wasn't really. I was innocent, so I didn't know like what was going on because I was
Right. Right.
growing up, and I was still learning. So that's whenever my mind had become really perverted, and once I started entertaining that, is whenever I began to just like just it became just started getting worse, and I knew I was once I yeah like I said started just entertaining that I was just learning more and about like the world and just as I was growing up, and I didn't make that choice to just I'm gonna serve God. I gave into that peer pressure. I gave into like the devil and any temptations, whatever was going on. I just wouldn't just say no.
Right.
That's one thing that I always struggle with. But now, as I since I've been saved, God's really helped me with that because I mean, just as just as a teenager and growing up, and just like when you're young, you just wanna like, if you don't get a hold of that and push it away and just um, make God the center of your heart
Right.
and just make that choice to just I'm gonna serve God and I'm gonna continue moving forward in that. then then the devil will use that and just keep drawing you aside, and eventually you'll just be like, wow, I thought I was saved and everything,
Right.
and
Right. Right.
just and just keeping that a secret and just moving away.
Right. That's interesting. Like how you're saying that. Yeah, you didn't like you didn't do a lot of stuff, but in your mind, really, you were sinning against God in your mind, and those are the things that a bunch of people, teenagers, and even adults, they think that you could sin against God with your eyes and with your thoughts, and so to hear that is like wow, like that this whole time you were just like being more perverted, feeding it, and like you say, if you don't control it. That's what the Bible says to hold every thought captive, right? To judge our thoughts. So it's crazy to hear that even though yeah you're not sinning, things that you can see, because sometimes we can see when people are sinning because it's we see it, right? But to think that you're sinning against God and nobody can even tell, but God knows our hearts, and so that's interesting to like because people don't understand that you can sin against God with your thoughts. You don't even have to do it. You know what I mean? The Bible says if you lust after a woman, you already committed adultery. You know what I mean? If you have unforgiveness in your heart, He's not going to forgive you. So like I'm glad you said that because there's people that need to hear that. But yeah, go ahead, bro. Continue. I didn't mean to cut you off.
So, and I mean that's mainly what was happening, and like I said, ever since I've gotten saved, I was dealing with that, but I knew. I mean, like I said, growing up in church, I just knew. I
Right.
knew like I can't do that. So I mean, it hasn't been easy, but I once you make up, especially as a young like a teenager or just whenever you get saved, as long as you make up your mind that I'm gonna serve God, even if maybe this will come out, this will be exposed, or this just keep God in the center of your heart, and it will really help a lot.
So okay, what are some things that God has been doing in your life, or maybe what are some things that you want God to do? With you, with things you want to see in the church or anything. Like, what are some things that God's doing in your life, or even things you want Him to do later on?
Well, I mean, now, right now, I mean, I do see things that God's doing, and just like, wow, I mean, I don't deserve, I don't deserve this, and I'm grateful for it. I mean, eventually I do wanna. Right now I'm in college, and God. That's what one thing that I do know is, so for when I was in when I had first started, I've always wanted to become a nurse, right? So I um, I was applying for nursing school, but I didn't even finish the application because I needed to get, I think it was like a transcript or something, but I knew I hadn't finished, and I think it was already past the deadline. So I was like, man, I'm gonna have to wait for the next, because it's only twice a year where they started accepting the applications. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to. But then I got this email that um, my application was accepted, and that I was um, that I was accepted into the program, and I started this time, and for all this thing, and that was one of the first things that I remember, ever since I had gotten saved, that God, that was like that I can clearly remember. That was the first door that God opened for me. 'Cause
Right,
I
right,
mean, I didn't even finish the application. I wasn't, I hadn't even. It was I was almost at the end, but I had to do these other things before so that I do remember that, and I was like, wow. So ever since I started that, I was like, I've been like, okay, thank you, God. I'm gonna do my best in this, and God, open this door. Help me get this done, and eventually, I wanna, as a nurse, as I wanna, not only just help people, but even people that are at the end of their lives, where they've they might, or they might not even know God. They might, they grew up, um, as they just grew up. Maybe they're old, or at the end of their lives they're gonna die, and maybe I can preach to them, and I can,
right,
right before they die, I can tell them that God loves them, and
right,
He can
right,
still
right,
change them
right.
even then, and maybe that'll help. So that's one thing I do want to eventually. I mean, eventually, of course, I do want to get married, have a um family, but and especially teach them to teach them the way I was taught,
Right, right.
and but that's one thing I do want to I do pray every day. God, help me get through this, get through nursing school, and I'll, I'll I will do my duty to preach to people. Maybe they might be at the end of their lives, they're dying. They God, and then God could reach, and I can help them
Right.
get learn about God, and that they can get saved and go to heaven.
Hey man, dang, that's cool. All right, so before we go, I always like to have uh, whoever's here just leave a few words for maybe for people who grew up similar to you, young kids, teenagers. They grew up in church. What are some things that you leave somebody? Some words of encouragement.
The main thing I would say for church kids, no matter how old you are, you can. It's always a gift being able to grow up in church, and being able to be kept, and saved from a lot of things in this world. And if you would make up your the sooner you make up your mind to serve God, sooner you can the sooner you can just, yeah, like I said, like, just make up your mind, make God the center of your life, and move forward in that. Of course, I do wish I had gotten saved sooner, because now that everything God's done, you know. But if you're young, and if you're a church kid, no matter how old you are, get saved. God will really help you. You have a gift, and we sometimes we take it lightly, and God can really use us, and make Him the center of your life, and He'll use you, and never know what God could do through you.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to give your life to Jesus Christ, just pray this simple prayer with me real quick. Say, Father God, I'm a sinner in need of a Savior. I ask that you forgive me of all my sin. Come into my heart and be my Lord and Savior. I believe you died on the cross and rose the third day. Thank you for forgiving me of all my sin. If you prayed that prayer and you need a church to go to, come in, that number on the bottom of the screen, come in contact with us, and we'll help you find a local church to go to and start living for God. Thank you.
Got 2 lanes on the one way. Got 2 lanes on the one way. Got